Hi, we are at the conference for the 10-year anniversary of the ETS, organized by the FSR Climate and by DG Climate Action. Here with us, we have Carlo Carraro. He's professor at the University of Venice, has been president of the university, and is a world-famous expert of international climate policy. Carlo, you are also a member of the IPCC. What are your expectations for the Paris conference in next December, and what do you think can be or should be the role of EU in this conference?
I'm quite confident that the COP21 in Paris will deliver positive important outcomes in terms of climate change control, in particular reduction of greenhouse gas gases. And the reason is that already the most important countries, including the European Union, have committed to reduce emissions. The European Union 40% by 2030, the United States more or less 27% by 2025, and China will peak emissions in 2030. These three major players account for about 60% of global emissions. So this is already a big achievement with respect to past meetings and conferences. So I'm quite confident that in Paris we will be able to reach an agreement, first of all. The agreement will be effective in reducing emissions much more than the Kyoto Protocol. And the real issues are those coming after Paris. That is, how we can verify and monitor the decision taken by the various countries in Paris, how we can succeed in enhancing the commitments and the ambitions that countries will propose and will be approved in Paris in a progressive increase of the capacity of different countries to tackle climate change. Of course, Paris will be one step of a process that will continue in the future, but it will be a very important step, and I'm very, very confident that the positive outcome will be achieved.
And what about which instrument can come out from this conference? Speaking about possible of carbon price, you think it's feasible an agreement on a carbon price at global level?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that there will be an agreement on a global carbon price. There will be commitments on emission reductions, and then each country will decide which policy to adopt in specific for the country that is going to reduce emissions. Europe has already a carbon price. The EU ETS is an important tool, and this important tool will continue in the future and will be strengthened by the Paris decision. But other regions and countries will not adopt a carbon pricing. They will adopt other tools, other regulatory tools, and other fiscal instruments to reduce carbon emissions. I think that the decision of a global carbon pricing will be the more efficient one, but this is not the moment to get it. We are far from an agreement on a global carbon price, but still we should not see this as a negative conclusion. As I said, it's a process. So for the moment, the process is leading to worldwide commitments that can enable the world to control about 80 or even 90% of total emissions. And then in the future, we will move to more efficient tools to do this job, to control emissions.
Okay, so a more decentralized approach can be more successful than a centralized global approach.
They are more successful in the short time to achieve an agreement. Okay. Then in the future, when this first step will be accomplished, we'll be able to improve it.
And lastly, how do you see the EU climate policy and in particular the ETS 10 years from now?
The EU climate policy is well known to be the most ambitious in the world. Sometimes it is criticized for being the most ambitious in the world because they say, sometimes in particular in the European business, the idea is that we should not move ahead before the other ones. Given that the climate change problem is a global problem and the solution must be a global one, it doesn't make much sense to, at least this is what someone thinks, to move ahead as a European Union more than what the other countries are doing. I still think that the leadership role of the European Union is an important one, and the fact that the European Union has been able to introduce the EU ETS, has been able to identify and commit to very ambitious targets is one of the reasons that led the other countries, that induced the other countries to follow. So the decision taken by United States, by China, by Russia, by Japan, by Korea, are important decisions which are imitating, following what the European Union has been able to do, and in particular has been able to do with the UETS 10 years ago and in the last 10 years. Because the UETS has imperfections, but again, it's a process. This is not a good reason to come out with a negative conclusion. It's a process. The UETS is an important step into the process, as well as other steps. But at the end, the UETS, it's the only market providing a price signal for investors. And we should not forget this. This is very important. And it's important in particular for long-term decisions in the energy sector, in the transport sector, in the building sector, those where decisions must take into account the climate change problem for emissions to be reduced over time. And this is the real objective that all of us have in mind.
Okay, so it's climate policy, it's a learning by doing process, one step at a time.
All policies, all international policies are a learning process. Consider how many years it took to get to an agreement on trade. And then benefits of trade, of international trade, are quite clear to all of us. But still it took more than 40 years to get to a global agreement on trade liberalization. Now we have been negotiating for about 20 years. The UETS has been in place for 10 years. We are celebrating the 10 years this year. And of course, it takes some more time to go to a much better international agreement. But still, we are moving faster than in many other fields.
Thank you, Carlo.